Hello and welcome. I am HG. Today I'd like to try something a little different here on my YouTube channel. What we have here is a game called Star Conflict. It's a free-to-play spaceborne dogfighting game available on Steam. I think it's only about 4 gigabytes in total, and it's actually a quite fun game. It does require an internet connection, since it is a multiplayer game, but most free-to-play games nowadays kinda tend to go that route anyway. So without further ado, I'd like to showcase some of the game's elements and tell you guys what it's about and some of its mechanics. When you first log in, you'll generally be presented with your ship hangar, which is where you can modify your various ships. As you can see here, I've got a couple ships of various sizes, and most ships come in 3 classes: Fighter, Frigate, and Interceptor. The smallest class is the Interceptor. As its name suggests, its intended role is to intercept enemy forces and generally be a nuisance. Mostly they fit in the role of reconnaissance and work really well at capturing objectives quickly. Because of their small size, they can generally outmaneuver most other ships, but the trade-off for this is that they sport only 2 fairly small, weak guns, and they're generally really susceptible to damage. Next up in terms of size is the Fighter. Essentially, this is your middle ground class ship, which sacrifices the Interceptor's ability to dance around at ludicrous speeds in exchange for more guns and armor. Chances are, if you're new to playing the game, they gave you one of these, considering they are really solid ships in most situations, giving both a comfortable cruising speed and a decent amount of firepower. They're really good starting ships and generally very well rounded. The remaining class, the Frigate, is the slowest and bulkiest, which it lacks speed, but it makes up for it in a lot of firepower. At lower levels, frigates generally come with beam lasers, which are really good at sustaining damage at a fairly decent range. However, higher level frigates may come with different kinds of weapons that deal different types of damage, including weapons that deal area of effect damage or are exceedingly long range, and generally the frigate can be made to suit a variety of different roles. However, being that they're so bulky, frigates tend to lack the ability to turn quickly, which means that attacks from blind spots by smaller craft such as the Interceptor can be especially deadly to you. Each ship generally has a number of slots for weapons and modifiers to improve your ship's combat performance. The number of slots for equipment is dependent on your ship's position in your faction's technology tree. Higher ranked ships have more slots for gadgets and modifiers. You purchase items with either credits or standards, which are a real money currency. You earn credits after each game, win or lose, but obviously winning gets you a tidier sum of cash than defeat does. After every game, you should be aware that you will be required to repair your ships and replenish any consumables, like ammo or missiles. Most of the time, this is effectively negligible, and you'll soon have enough to purchase your next ship. Gameplay follows your standard WASD setup for movement, with the inclusion of Q and E to adjust the roll of your spaceship. Space will let you move up, and left alt will make you move down. Aiming and maneuvering is achieved by moving your mouse. Moving your mouse in any direction of the screen will turn your ship in that direction, making tracking targets easy and effective. To fire your main weapon, click the left mouse button. Note that the longer you sustain fire with your main weapon, the greater the chance of overheating. Therefore, it is wise to watch the heat indicator that will circle your targeting reticle to avoid overheating your main gun. To fire a missile or other such secondary weapon, click your right mouse button. Missiles take a short time to reload, and you only have a select few of them, so timing their use wisely is essential to their success. All ships also have a special ability activated with the F key. The special ability is dependent on the ship's class and your faction. For example, my frigate has a secondary long-range laser weapon, effective for sniping other ships outside my usual firing range. Another example might be my fighter, here displaying its overdrive special ability, which allows it to temporarily increase its rate of fire and increase its weapon cooldown, allowing it to deal more damage for a short period of time. Interceptors, given their fast nature, have abilities that can allow them to traverse large portions of the game's map in very little time, making them great for charging points at the beginning of a game, or rushing in to provide support where it's needed the most. Damage in Star Conflict is broken up into three main categories: kinetic, thermal, and EM. Kinetic type damage, typically found in your ship's railguns, will deal excellent blows to an opponent's hull, but are typically weak against shields. EM damage, normally found in plasma weapons, is typically excellent against shields, but weaker against hulls. Thermal damage, found in laser weapons, is more of a middle ground, being good at both shredding through armor and shields, though it isn't particularly speedy at one or the other. Choosing your weapons to suit your ship's role can help bolster your damage output and increase your ship's survivability. Game modes tend to focus more on PvP, with both the Skirmish and Sector Control game modes dealing primarily with player versus player combat. Skirmish is your typical matchmaking jump in and blow stuff up type game mode, putting you behind your ship in the middle of a contested battleground with no questions asked. Sector Control typically focuses more heavily on corporation fights, which is Star Conflict's version of guilds. Corporations fight to expand the borders of their faction's sector, in a fashion similar to PlanetSide 2. You don't necessarily need to be in a corporation to help your faction in these fights, but typically there are a larger number of corporation-aligned players fighting for one side or the other, which bring with them a greater amount of organization, for better or worse. PvE missions are granted through the PvE tab, which groups you up into groups of 4 and spawns waves of enemies as you fight to complete objectives. Death is permanent for the round, which can negatively affect your group's ability to push through more difficult rounds of fighting. However, if your team can make it to the next round of the stage, your ship will be redeployed and you can get back into the battle. Lastly comes the new sandbox mode, though it is in a closed beta at the moment. Supposedly this is supposed to incorporate both free-roaming PvP elements as well as PvE elements as you fight against an unknown alien threat. I suspect this has a more story behind it, but seeing as I'm not in the closed beta, I don't really know much about it. Star Conflict isn't necessarily a hard game to pick up if you can accept that death will come occasionally, or repeatedly depending on your piloting skills. I personally found the piloting controls intuitive and easy to learn, and I suspect most people might be able to find them that way as well. The game seems to have pretty stable servers, so it's a breath of fresh air in a market saturated with "why the hell did I die behind this rock?" and "why are my bullets not doing any damage even though I'm sitting right on top of this guy?" Level design, too, is rather nice when you stop to take a look at where you're fighting. The skyboxes capture the deep space setting of Star Conflict, and the amount of cover granted by asteroids, space junk, and massive space stations is generally good and allows for good, fun gameplay. Matchmaking can be a little slow depending on when you're playing, but I've never really had to wait more than a few minutes for matchmaking to fit me in with a group or team and let me fly around. Overall, I highly recommend Star Conflict. It's an excellent free-to-play game on Steam, and it's an immense amount of fun to play. There really aren't many glaring issues that stand out, which is good, given that even major publishers have issues that are far more damning than matchmaking and progression can take a little bit of time. It's a stable, enjoyable game that I'm sure you'll enjoy too.